Hello, everyone, and welcome to Algernon Pharmaceuticals Facebook Live. I'm Cyndi Edwards from PR Media Now, and we are joined by the CEO of Algernon Pharmaceuticals, Christopher Moreau. Good to see you, Chris.
Nice to see you too, Cyndi. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much, and very excited about the news that you have to share with us today, all about full enrollment now for the human study trial of Ifenprodil on COVID-19 patients. Why is this such a big deal? How many people do we have in the trial now? And the significance of all this.
So the trial is for 150 patients, and but it's very normal to have a certain percentage of patients dropping out of a clinical trial. And so this happens all the time. There are personal reasons that people will join a trial and then leave it. So we added about 12% of our original target, 150, up to 168. And so at some time over the weekend, I got an email that our 168th patient enrolled. Actually, the patient was from Ohio, just looking at my notes. And I think our first patient was from the US and our last patient enrolled is from the US. So it's a very important milestone. You and I were just chatting before we went on live, what it really means to have full enrollment in a clinical trial. And especially during COVID, we are doing a COVID trial. So we don't have the sort of the reverse, but a lot of clinical trials that are going on right now are having trouble because people are not going out. They're doing telemedicine, and to enroll in a clinical trial, you have to be hands-on. Typically, you're going to get tests, you're seeing your physician, and so on. But having full enrollment is a very important step for any clinical trial, and we're celebrating that today.
And of course, we welcome everyone that's watching today. In fact, Brian Adams had mentioned, there he says, "Hi guys, great job." So Brian, thank you very much for watching and for sending along those great wishes.
So I could say the Brian Adams, but I guess to that chap, he is Brian Adams, but it would be interesting if it was the musical Brian Adams.
Yes, yes, yes. And if you know Brian Adams, the musical Brian Adams, let him know about this. It's exciting. So let's talk about the people that are even qualified to get into the study, because you have to have some very specific things going on in order to get Ifenprodil. So explain that for our friends at home.
So first off, you have to be, we are limited to 5 hospitals in the US. There was 2 hospitals in Australia, 2 in the Philippines, and 1 large facility in Bucharest, Romania. So first off, you had to be at that hospital. You had to be admitted, and you had to be sick enough to be on supplemental oxygen. So that means when they did your oxygen test, and confirmed COVID as well, that your oxygen wasn't quite up to normal. That means you're struggling to oxygenate your blood because your lungs aren't performing. Then you would qualify to get into the Ifenprodil COVID trial. And on the WHO score, that's the World Health Organization ordinal score from 0 to 8. 0, you're healthy, you don't have COVID. 8, you've passed away because of COVID. You're at I think a 4 or a 5 when you're on oxygen. And the normal progression is to go on mechanical ventilation. That's an assist. You're having trouble breathing. Then the next step is intubation, where you're actually put out and they insert breathing tubes down your bronchial passages. And then if you're continuing to go down the path, you're having problems with other organ failure, and it's a rapid decline. And this can happen quite quickly, but not everybody can join the trial. I was mentioning to you earlier, probably some 200 patients were screened for the trial. So they said to the physician, we'd like to get in it, but when they were actually past the point of oxygen issues. So they were actually on their way to mechanical ventilation, and that was, so we couldn't enroll them in the trial. But that
so after intubation, there's no chance. It's got to be before that happens.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you're intubated, you're quite ill, and you have pneumonia, and you've got other issues. So because you're actually out, the machine is breathing for you. You're not breathing on your own, and it's there's I don't have the final numbers, but once you're on intubation, it's a very difficult place to come back from.
Earl is asking, with full enrollment now, can we expect a firm date for interim data release?
We did give a firm date, and we've now said the third week of December. So that's anywhere between December the 15th to the 21st. What we wanted to do, this is a bit of detail that maybe folks don't really need, but when you are randomized for the trial, it may take a day or two for you to get your actual treatment. And so it's a 2-week treatment period. We really didn't want to release the interim data prior to the last patient getting that 2 week of treatment, and then we'll be able to share the interim data report with the public. So we've announced today in the news release, third week of December.
And the whole reason you're introducing Ifenprodil as part of a patient's therapy is to prevent lung damage, right? Is that the ultimate goal here?
Well, I guess the ultimate goal is to reduce the severity and duration of a COVID infection, and think of a vaccine as an example is not a protective shield. So you actually get the infection,
right,
even if you're vaccinated, but your body has the antibodies that are already developed and waiting for it, and it dispatches the illness quite quickly. In our case, with Ifenprodil, you at this point of our testing, we don't know if Ifenprodil could be prophylactic, meaning it could protect somebody from actually getting it. That would be an interesting focus of research. But you've got the disease, but can Ifenprodil dampen the effect? Can it reduce the inflammation? Can it give your body some more time to fight the illness? And can, by doing that, reduce the damage that can occur? Because what we're seeing are people, these long haulers, the folks that come out of a serious infection have challenges to their lungs, fibrosis is building up, and what we're hoping is that Ifenprodil is sending people home days earlier than in the control group, and that they're actually recovering much more quickly, and they're not going to see the damage in the lungs that would happen if you didn't take Ifenprodil and the disease was left to take its natural course.
Tom Reynolds says, thanks for all the hard work. Are you still on track to have the full results by the end of Q4? Thank you.
We will not have the results by the end of Q4 for the final study because it's 2 weeks of treatment and it's 2 weeks of follow-up. So that means the last patient will receive follow-up by the end of December. We haven't come back with a time for the final report because I don't want to come up with 2 times.
Right.
I'd like to be, but we have said all along it's 4 weeks, 2 weeks treatment for the final patient, 2-week follow-up. And then it's about 3 to 4 weeks to get the final data in. This is another good thing about interim data. It's giving investors and the public and ourselves a chance to sort of see at 75 patients just how Ifenprodil is doing. And the one thing, again, we couldn't control was just the enrollment rate. The enrollment rate is off by about 5 to 6 weeks. Some of it because we got backed up, but the investigators weren't inputting the data on a more timely basis. There's lots of pressure for ICU medicine. It's not a typical clinical trial. It's 24/7 in these hospitals, hallway medicine, exhausted physicians, and all of their team is involved in entering the data. They're also running 5 trials at the large Romanian hospital in Bucharest. So they were really pushed to the limit. So that's we'll come back with an update on final data.
Obviously, though, now that you've got 100% patient enrollment, doctors are definitely getting on board with this and saying, let's definitely give this a try. And they're seeing something, obviously.
Yeah, and I'm not going to comment on that. But what I can say is that there are, I mean, we're all human beings running these trials. Even the physicians are prone to, the example I make is that if people are in a clinical trial and the physicians are thinking that really maybe they don't think it's effective, or they don't believe in the trial anymore, that can impact on enrollment. And there are a lot of trials that don't end up with full enrollment. They're called early. And sometimes you might think to yourself, for a physician, he's got to believe in the clinical trial. So that's another, we're celebrating today, not with party whistles and so on, but I'm celebrating my team today, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I want to pat my team on the back because it's been a really tremendous. It's been a tremendous thing that's happened with our company since March. On March 22nd or 3rd, we announced that we were investigating Ifenprodil. The drug was unknown to the US FDA. Health Canada, it had never been sold in these countries. And we were able to convince the FDA that the scientific rationale to test the drug in COVID was reasonable. We got approval. This is about a $6 million trial. We have not had any financial support from government or charitable organizations or research. We've done this absolutely on our own, our company and our group of investors. That's something to be very proud of. And the fact that we were able to meet all these milestones, we can't control the data. So I'm hopeful the data will show that Ifenprodil is working. How could we not have taken this step to see if Ifenprodil could help people? It's a global pandemic. And if we're right, that's going to be a fantastic thing for all of us to have been a part of. But we've done this really on our own, and I'm celebrating our team. They put in tremendous hours and personal dedication, way beyond the norm. I mean, these are people that deeply care about other people, and that you just can't do this for commercial reasons. There's a deep care, and it's hard not to get a bit emotional about it, but I'm celebrating our team today.
Well, let's talk about the stock, because obviously there's some buzz surrounding it. Since August 31st, something like 36 million shares have been traded in Algernon stock.
Right.
Yeah.
36 million shares. The average closing price was 28.5 cents. So during the day, the stock can go up and down, but that's the average closing price. We have 130 million shares outstanding. So we have a market cap of about 39 million. And that's sort of an interesting number. I mean, we're hopeful that what you should see in a normal phase 2 situation, and I've said this many times, is that prior to news coming out, you should see, one would expect an increase in the share price and also in the liquidity of the stock. That's what you would probably see. Now, we're in a very different situation. Every day news is coming out about vaccines. It's a very competitive, it's not just a typical trial. You've got all sorts of other factors going on. So that's one issue. And not only that, there are probably a few hundred companies that have a phase 1, 2, or 3 trial going on. They may announce data at any time. So it's a bit of a unique situation, but I still think that typical phase 2 behavior will apply here. We should see a nice increase or a meaningful increase in the share price and liquidity.
Jim says, we're celebrating with you. Will the interim data be enough for emergency use by the FDA?
It's possible if we show a mortality signal that's strong enough. And we don't do this independently. We are in touch with the US FDA, so we'll go to them. Now, one of the challenges also is that we're not providing a p-value for this interim data. And the p-value is a statistical certainty that your data is reproducible. It's very complex. And they look at a certain, I think 65% of where the data is falling, and are you in the standard deviation? It's very complex. But one thing against going for emergency use approval may be the fact that because we don't have this p-value attached to this data set, they may look at that and go, well, we really need to wait. But again, it's an unusual circumstance. There really hasn't been a therapeutic that has jumped out and is being widely touted as being effective. And so, we're going to talk to them. We'll send them the data and say, this is our interim data, and what are your thoughts? And we'll wait for their feedback, but it's on our minds.
I saw a headline today on the news saying something about we could have vaccines here ready to go in the States by Christmas. So we've all heard lately Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca. Moderna today said they were seeking emergency emergency authorization for COVID-19. I think there's still a misconception that if a vaccine is approved and it starts getting distributed, COVID-19 goes away. That is absolutely not the case.
Well, I think there are a number of issues. Number one, and I would be wrong to be not a huge supporter of a vaccine. everybody should be supportive of a vaccine, because I think that that is something that would be incredibly helpful. I think it will be a while before the vaccine, first off, it will be made available to likely first responders, frontline workers. It requires 2 doses. Then you've got an issue with this particular vaccine has to be stored at minus 100.
Yeah.
That's very cold. So it requires cold storage, cold chain management. There's a issue to getting it delivered. It's going to be many, many months. You also have recent polls suggesting only 50 to 60% of people are open to taking the vaccine. AstraZeneca has come back now and admitted that they've made some mistakes in their data calculations. That doesn't make people feel good. I mean, that's a pretty big firm compared to Algernon. And their announcement of how good the data was based on a subset. They hadn't analyzed it thoroughly. They were surprised by the data. I think people that got 1 dose did better than the people that got 2 doses. It was an under 55 age group. I mean, there was just so much information. People need to feel good that we're not rushing this. I've said in the past that the CEO of Merck, Ken Fraser, had said that Merck's developed a number of the vaccines in the last 5 to 7 years. And he said, if you're going to put something in 1 billion people, you better know what it does. You're only going to know what it does when you have reasonable safety data. You only have safety data based on the months that you've been testing it. Right. So 3 months safety data is great. 6 months would be a lot better. So would a year. But people have to make that personal choice. But it's going to take time. Some people won't take it. Some people won't respond to it. We still need to invest in therapeutic options. Everybody can see today that we do not have a reasonable therapeutic go-to for COVID-19. If we had one already in place, physicians would be using it. That's why we're in this process. We want to see if Ifenprodil is working. But there will always be a need for therapeutics. Plus, a vaccine, if you think about when COVID appeared and how long it's taken to get a vaccine done, what about COVID-24? What if it happens again? And so it's going to take another year, 1.5 years to target, because vaccines are specific to a specific pathogen. So in our view, you need therapeutics. We need a number of them. We hope Ifenprodil will be in the top 1 to 3 therapeutic options. That's what we've set everything in play to find that out. And we don't control the data. We're hopeful, but we've delivered on all of we're just quietly in the background. I'm reading some other stories and stocks, and some of the values are mind-boggling, and we just continue to plod along, hitting our milestones. And that's why today is a big day for us, and it should be for all of our investors too.
Is Algernon prepared to ramp up production of Ifenprodil if it is approved?
We won't be able to produce Ifenprodil if it is approved in the near term. We need to rely on a supply of Ifenprodil from a number of suppliers, potential suppliers. I'm not going to go into detail because I can't. But we have been working on it. I have a high level of confidence that if the need is there, in other words, we do get emergency use approval, that we will have a supply of Ifenprodil. We'll release more details as we progress. Impossible for us to have started manufacturing this drug. It was not part of our normal process. We were planning on testing it for IPF and chronic cough, which trial is going on. We began to synthesize a small quantity of cGMP grade material called active pharmaceutical ingredient, the part of the drug that actually works. We retained Cascade Chemistry in the US a number of months ago. We've completed that program. We have about 2 kilograms of API, but there's still much work to be done to take that API. Is it in a tablet? Is it a capsule? Is it intravenous? There's formulation involved. There's stability data. There's testing, some talks if we change the formulation. It's very complex. It's very involved. We have done the best we can to make sure that if this works, we can get Ifenprodil available to treat COVID. That's been going on behind the scenes. It's a good question, but to make this a commercial reality, we obviously need product to sell. So we're working.
And for anybody who's not familiar with Ifenprodil, it is a drug that's already been deemed safe. This isn't a brand new drug. This is a drug that's been around since the 70s, and you're just repurposing it for something new. Just to
Right.
make that very clear, this is not something brand new that's being tested right out of the gate.
This drug was originally developed and is still being sold by Sanofi in Japan. It's also sold in South Korea. I think the market is somewhere in the 100 million pills a year in the Japanese market. It's used to treat vertigo, vertigo caused by certain things that happen, hemorrhage and other events, neurological events.
Mm.
There's a number of smaller, one larger and a number of smaller generic manufacturers, but it's not approved anywhere else. It can't be brought into the US. This will be our data. Algernon has filed new intellectual property rights around the use of Ifenprodil for respiratory diseases, including IPF and what causes IPF, including flu. So we've protected ourselves from that view, but thanks for mentioning that. Yes, this is a drug that's had a relatively safe history in the last 40 years, where major issues have been sort of GI tract disruption or some headache, and just very mild. So it's a very, very known safe drug. And that's another important point. We do have data on the drug so far, and the data is that it's quite safe. Mm. We've been approved by our data safety monitoring board to carry on with the trial.
Next question is, Algernon is still enrolling patients now, and when will you determine how big a group you need for phase 3?
So we've stopped enrollment at 168. So we're not enrolling any more patients for the phase 2b3, phase 2b3 trial. When the final data set is produced, then we'll look at the data, and the data will tell us how powered our phase 3 needs to be. Do we need another 400 patients, another 600, another 800? The stronger the signal, the less patients we need in the phase 3 part. Count on about a 2-month delay from the end of the phase 2b, sort of the data readout, to starting the phase 3. And I think the phase 3 trial will be very different from our phase 2b. I do think if we have very good data from our phase 2b, we will get earned media. I think the world will learn about Ifenprodil. I think we'll get lots of interest from large organizations, institutions, to run the phase 3 with them. I think we'll be able to access a large number of patients very quickly. And so I think that phase 3 trial will go quite quickly. But that's but we've stopped enrolling for the phase 2b. It's done. And we see where the chips fall, and then we decide if we're going to move to that phase 3.
And if we do go into phase 3, multi-country once again?
It's possible. We didn't do it to increase the ethnicity of the population in our trial, strictly for the number of patients. So it would depend. If we got, as an example, 5 or 10 large U.S. institutions and Canadian institutions, then it'd be multinational. It will all be about how quickly can we, how many patients do we need? Do we need 600 or 1,000? And with the number of institutions that have indicated interest, or we're looking at their rate of enrollment, they'll make a projection. We can do 100 patients a month, or we can do 500 patients in 1 month. It just depends. And keep in mind, COVID, in 2 weeks, you're either doing really well or you're kind of going home.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
You're not doing well or you're going home. So it can shift very quickly, and you can't plan ahead. All of a sudden you have one state it's just terrible, the numbers, and all of a sudden within 3 weeks it's shifted. So it's tough to plan for. We'll make that decision when we get to it.
Any updates on the enrollment of Ifenprodil IPF and chronic cough phase 2 human study?
It's still in progress. We are seeing some impact. I think I mentioned this on the last interview from COVID. I think we're going to be, our next target is 50% enrollment. That's a 20-patient trial. And we may also be looking at adding one additional site to make sure we hit our targets, our projections for that trial. So I don't have a formal update. The next announcement will be when we hit 50%. That would be 10 patients.
Are there still opportunities to buy into a PP, asks Earl.
I'm assuming that means private placement. We do not have a financing in place, and so if you're excited or interested in the Algernon story, you will have to acquire stock on the CSE, the OTCQB, or the exchange in Frankfurt.
Got it. And dependent on how well this phase 2 trial goes, can you not then ask for the emergency authorization to get going before phase 3 starts?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Just for clarity, somebody had asked, would we go for emergency use on the interim data?
Okay.
So the interim data may not be strong enough, and because we're not doing a statistical review p-values, we'll see. Once the final data set is in, we will have the statistical significance. Is the data real? Can it be reproduced? What is the p-value? The likelihood that it's real, can be reproduced. That is when we would look at it and say, now we can go to the US FDA. So the three options are we don't see a signal at all for some reason. That would be confounding, but it can happen. 2, the data is strong and we're going to move to a phase 3. Or the third option is the data is very, very strong and we immediately go to the US FDA for emergency use. Those are the three three curtains that will be open for us when the final data set is available.
And we got a message from Walt saying, great job. Hopefully approval will help a lot of people with COVID as well as other potential diseases. I think that's why we're all here, right?
Thank you.
It's about helping people. I'm going to let you have the last word, Christopher. Oh, wait. How long before you get the final data from Alex?
It's going to be moved from the end of Q4. That was our original. Since we've closed off the study, or rather our last patient is enrolled, it's 4 weeks, 2 weeks of treatment, 2-week follow-up. So I will come back to the market quite soon. We just don't want to give another date without having some certainty. It's typically about 3 to 4 weeks after your last patient is out, which is 4 weeks after the last patient is in, and then we'll have the final data set.
Well, congratulations on having full enrollment now for your trial, for human trials. I think that's amazing. Anything you want to leave us with, Chris, before we sign off?
Do we know if that was which Brian Adams that was?
It was the Brian Adams.
Right. Okay. Just again, exciting times, and we're hopeful that we see a positive signal trending in our interim data coming up. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everybody for your kind words and for your questions. We always appreciate that. And Christopher Moreau, thank you. Always good to speak to you. And if you want more information, algernonpharmaceuticals.com. And of course, always check out their Facebook page because we update this pretty regularly whenever we have some news to share. So everybody have a wonderful day, and we'll sign off now. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.